We are currently recommissioning a 1986 Honda VF1000R for a client who believes it was at least 15 years since it was last on the road. This bike is quite interesting as the bodywork is in mint condition, but the running gear and engine have not fared well at all, which makes this a perfect candidate for a sympathetic restoration, where we keep as much of the originality as possible but get the bike back to being a reliable, road-going classic for future generations to enjoy. As we have another full restoration about to begin, I wasn't going to cover this one in much detail on the channel, but many of you pointed out similar projects of your own and felt it would be helpful to follow along with this. I'm going to keep these videos short and more technically focused, in the hope it will encourage others with their projects. On first inspection, I've checked the state of the fluids and the electrical system. The engine oil looks okay, but all the brake and clutch fluids have evaporated or solidified. The glycol in the coolant has separated into a gelatin substance. Last but not least, gas that was left in the tank has turned into a tar substance, clogging the petcock and fuel lines. So I expect to see similar carnage in the float bowls of the carbs. Having said that, all those issues can be fixed, and in general I don't see any major mechanical issues, although we won't know for sure until we get the motor running. The first thing I like to do when recommissioning a bike is determine the health of the engine, since we don't know why this bike was parked in the first place. It's pointless trying to get this one running without stripping it down for the reasons I already explained. So the first thing I want to do is strip the bodywork to gain access to the engine and carb bank and remove the carbs for inspection. To gain access to the gas tank mounts, I first remove the tower unit, which is a one-piece unit on the VF. Before starting a project of this scale, I highly recommend acquiring a service manual or workshop manual for the bike, preferably one from the original manufacturer. It will be invaluable in determining the correct order of disassembly and reassembly. Next, it's critical you take pictures of every component on the bike before you remove it, including the fasteners. Then bag every component with its fasteners and write a description on the bag. If you don't have a workshop manual, I also recommend writing down a description of the disassembly process. And even better, if you can, make videos of your work just like I do. With the tail unit removed, I can access the two retaining bolts for the gas tank and quickly remove it, being sure to empty out any bad gas before disconnecting the fuel hose. Removing the gas tank reveals the top of the airbox, ignition coils and cam cover for the rear cylinders. If you see any damage, incorrect or missing fasteners, make a note for replacement or repair. I can now remove the airbox to reveal the carb bank below. Noting the air cleaner will need replacing. Here we can see the top of the fan shroud and lower plenum chamber for the airbox. This needs to be removed to gain better access to the carb bank. The retaining screws often need encouragement with an impact driver to loosen them. And now for the tricky bit, as removing 4 carbs wedged into a V formation locked in 30-year-old rock-hard carb rubbers is not a task for the faint-hearted. And while this looks crude, the only success I've had doing this is with a crowbar levered against the cam covers, remembering, of course, to loosen the carb retaining clamps beforehand. Now, a critical thing to note here is that the front and rear carbs on each side are retained to each other via screws, but the left hand side pair and the right hand side pair are only linked together by the fuel link pipes, air link pipes and the choke push rods. And note here that the throttle linkages are only locked to each other via springs. In manhandling the carbs out of the bike, these springs invariably fall out, so keep a close eye on this. Here you can see me fishing out the springs from the V of the engine with a magnet. With the carbs removed, the oil union and coolant link pipes are exposed, the latter needing to be removed to thoroughly flush the coolant system. Okay, so we're working on the bank of carbs from the VF1000R, which is just being recommissioned. So this is not a full restoration, but we know these carbs have been probably sat nearly 15 years without the bike running. So for sure, they're going to need a full rebuild. So we've got the kits, I've got the carbs off the bike. So what I'm going to do now, this is a very complex V formation, and there's a lot of interlocks between the carbs for driving the butterflies, and it's quite complex with a number of springs and levers and so on. The first thing is get a really detailed set of photographs. I want to photograph every single screw placement, where all the springs and adjuster screws are, everything, because we're going to completely blow this apart, and we need to be able to get it back together in exactly the same way. So I'm going to take 20-30 photos. Replacing all these have a link pipe, plastic link pipe for the fuel between the carbs, and commonly the O-rings go on these over time. So we're going to be checking these pipes, make sure they've got no cracks in them, because they also go brittle, and getting the carbs off can often crack the pipe. So we're going to check the integrity of these pipes. We're going to replace all the O-rings. We're going to do full gasket set. Shouldn't have to replace the jets. I always like to keep the jets if we can, because it's should have been jetted properly for this bike. The only thing we have to consider is this bike did have an aftermarket exhaust on it, and we're going to go back to the standard exhaust. So probably I will have to check if hopefully there's some numbering on the jets, and I just need to check if somebody changed the jets out when they put the free flow exhaust on. I do see markings on the carbs which suggests they have been apart at some point in the past, so that's a possibility. So yeah, we're going to need to check all of that. Like I said, you can never have too many photos. As I stated at the beginning, I want to keep these recommissioning videos fairly short to keep interest in the project as a whole. So I'll end this first video at this point, and we'll pick up in the next video with the strip down of the carbs, ultrasonic cleaning, and then full reassembly with new rebuild kits from Honda. See you then.